Sabili in Damascus, Syria. I'm really, really pleased this evening to finally speak with someone that I've been sort of communicating with for some time, a journalist with Al Mayadeen, amongst other media outlets, Myriam Charabaty, based in Lebanon. Myriam, thank you for coming on, and good evening.
Hi, Vanessa. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. Definitely exciting that we're finally talking, indeed. And
Yeah, I mean, my plan was kind of to come to Lebanon. But as we know, the Israelis bombed the main border road between Syria and Lebanon. In fact, they created a huge crater in the middle of the road on both sides. And then I was going to actually sort of climb the very steep
Greater.
sides of the road to get to the other side to get a Lebanon driver. And then, of course, we heard that the US influenced officials in Lebanon had closed it completely, so people are not allowed in or out for the time being. Let's hope that that changes, but we're not expecting it to change anytime soon, I don't think.
Yeah, now we're here.
Yeah, so now we're here. Now we're here on Zoom because that was that was the closest we could get to each other actually right now. I wanted to first of all, I did do a post on my Substack just saying that I was going to be talking to you, and I took an excerpt from your latest article for Al Mayadeen, the title of which is "Liberation, Not a Clash of Religions." And you're talking about the true nature of the conflict. Can you give some insights into what you mean by that? I find that very interesting. It's not a clash of religions, and of course, it is consistently portrayed as exactly this in the West.
Right. So this is one of the most important points that I find myself often discussing with especially like my Western friends and audience. The truth is that the Western narrative has historically painted the conflict as quote unquote Jewish Islamic conflict, and has painted Christians quote unquote as either neutral or in defense of the Jews in the face of the Islamic kind of like quote unquote barbaric expansionist approach. And that's quite frankly one of the most ridiculous narratives that I've heard, because historically speaking, this has never been the case in the region.
Mm.
And if we look at countries like Syria or Iraq, uh, or even Lebanon, we can see that this is not the case. Christians, Muslims, if we look at Damascus, we see even Jews continue to
Hmm.
live in harmony together, and together against Israel, right, as a Zionist
Mm.
project. What it is that Israel is a Zionist project. It's a political project. It has a purpose. It serves a geostrategic purpose for the West, currently led by the U.S. imperialist kind of agenda, but it serves the entire West. So basically, when we say that this is a religious clash, we are pinning people against each other by virtue of a deluded identity, when
Hmm.
in fact it's an Arab-Israeli, Arab-Western war. It's an occupation to begin with. It's an occupied land, an occupied people that live under the oppression of Israel, the most advanced US proxy in the region, if we want to put it that way. So we're not really dealing with a Jewish Islamic uh, conflict or a
Hmm.
clash. What the people need to understand is that this entire region, the Arab region, the Levant, specifically, into the Gulf historically, has the religions in it have coexisted, right? So the first religion, Abrahamic religion, to come forth was Judaism, and then Christianity followed, and then Islam followed. And so some of the Jews at some point were like immersed into Christianity. With the emergence of Islam, a lot of the Christians were emerged into Islam. Some of them did not. While certain tribal conflict did exist, it remained tribal in essence. But at the core, the Abrahamic religions were able to coexist.
Mm.
for a long period of time. And we can see that very prominently in some of the historic cities, including Baghdad, including Damascus, including even Beirut, even Akka, prior to the occupation, right?
Yeah.
Haifa, Akka, Jaffa, all of it. We see it, all of it.
Mm.
So it's really not a clash of religions. It's a problem of Zionism. Zionism as a political project. Knowing that, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if you might be able to correct me here if I'm mistaken, Vanessa.
Mm.
Zionism was at some point under the UN Charter considered racism, uh, historically speaking, and it was the rise of Christian Zionism uh, came at a certain point institutionally, uh, grew institutionally, um, eh, with the hopes of kind of breaking down that stigma on
Mhm.
Zionism. Like, no, it's not racist, but what it is is also one of the disillusioned concepts because there's nothing called Christian Zionism. It
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
practically doesn't exist. It's a political word game put forward to delude the people of a certain role.
Mm.
Right? What it is you're either a Christian or a Zionist because Zionism is not a religion.
Yes.
Zionism cannot be a religion. Christianity, on the hand, is a religion, and you cannot be pro-occupation while also being a Christian. It's a it's a inherently problematic combo, right? It
Yeah.
cannot exist. And this was said not just by me. Like it's not us journalists or us people kind of coming forward making this claim. This is a claim that has been repeatedly noted by clergy, by priests,
Mhm.
uh, even Archbishop Atalahanna in Al-Quds has most recently made that claim. So it's really not a clash of religions. I don't know if I kind of put that into perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
no, absolutely. I mean, I think I know certainly when Zionism was sort of incubated in the late 1900s, it was described even by Jews as being another anti-Semitic cult. Which is sort of extraordinary when you look at now and the weaponization of terminology like
right, and
anti-Semitism.
even I think demographically, if we look at the number of Jews supporting Israel versus the number of Jews rejecting
Yeah,
the Zionist project, we can see that demographically speaking, the number of Jews that are anti-Israel are relatively a majority, right? Because we that would include the Jews in Iran.
yeah, who I met, by the way. I mean, I actually sort of sat and talked with them when I was in Iran and traveling around Isfahan and Shiraz and Tehran. Kind of fascinating, really, that they preferred to stay in Iran than to make aliyah to Israel,
Oh,
because
definitely.
basically, as you pointed out, they don't believe that the state of Israel should exist now. It should exist after, if I'm correct, I'm not a great theologian, but it should exist after the coming of Christ, the second coming.
Right, and
Because of course,
it's not a state. It's not a state per se in
no,
the sense that
exactly.
that the Israeli project has put it forward. Even the Yemeni Jews were only forced, literally forced, out of Yemen
Mm.
during the US-led war on Yemen. And I don't know if you remember this, but like several planes were flown into into Yemen and carried Yemeni Jews into Israel
Mm.
uh, under threat of fire.
Mm.
Uh, so
Yeah.
so when we talk about Judaism, we don't talk about Israel. We talk about Judaism as a religion.
Mm.
The truth is that this entire region, the axis of resistance, to put it very clearly, the axis of resistance has no issue with Judaism itself,
Mm.
right? It's not an anti-Jewish movement. It's not an anti-Christian movement. It's not a it's not an ISIS-like movement as the West continuously tries to portray it to be.
Mm.
In fact, it's everything that ISIS is not. It's it's the rise of an Islam that is not British born,
Yes.
if we put it that
Yeah.
way.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
could put
that's a
it.
very good point. Um, and I think there's one point. I mean, when we were talking this morning, I'd like you to expand on this idea or this concept that we were talking about, that which resonates with me because in Syria it's very much the same thing. People are Syrian first, and their faith comes secondary to their nationality, to their
Right.
identity. Right, and you were talking about this morning in relation to the resistance. So, in other words, as you were saying, this is a movement to liberate all Arab lands from occupation, whether that occupation is by Israel, or whether that occupation is by the US, or whether that occupation is by the proxies of the US, like the Kurds in northeast Syria or Al
Right.
Qaeda in the northwest, and so on. Can you expand on that a little bit so that people can understand, in a way, the secular nature of the resistance, in fact, the sort of cohesion of the different faiths under a nationalist, if you want to call it that, umbrella?
So here we need to talk about also about three main ideas. We need to talk about the idea of the Arab world being part of the Islamic world, but being
Mm-hmm.
distinct from it, right? So the Arab world includes um, includes communities, ethnicities, and religions that extend beyond Islam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the Arab world precedes the rise of Islam, per se. However, with the rise of Islam, it was unified uh, on a sociopolitical level. It was differently unified on a sociopolitical level, and this also comes with the global change that existed from tribal towards national, towards building empires, towards growth, and it did not come without conflict inherently. But the conflict was seldom about being from various religions and more about it being political. And here we need to talk a bit about the Crusader era,
Mm-hmm.
right? The European crusades, the campaigns that came to the Middle East, quote unquote Middle East, because that was how they viewed us.
Yeah.
We are the Arab world. In their perception, we are the middle of their East. Thus, that terminology. So, so from the Crusader perspective, it was the coming to the Middle East where there are resources at a time where Europe was losing resources. It didn't have enough resources to feed its own people, to have that quote unquote luxury life that it does today. So this is one thing we need to talk about. Another thing we need to talk about is the concept that um, Islam or the Islamic world is not about turning every community within it into an Islamic community. There is no intention to make the Christians Muslims. There is no intention to make the Jews Muslims. There's no intention to make the Kurds Arabs. There is no intention to turn the Armenians into Arabs, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
these are communities that entered the Arab world historically a very long time ago, and they immersed themselves into the Islamic and Arab world, and they live within it as a singular entity. We do not exist within the Arab world as multiple entities. We are one people, one social fabric, despite having different faiths or religious beliefs. And in that sense, the war we are seeing today, Vanessa, is a war against that Arab identity. It's not a war against our faith on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It's a war against our Arab identity inherently, and not just our Arab identity as Sykes-Picot have divided it to be, but our collective Arab identity, our heritage that extends from Yemen to Al-Quds to Beirut to Damascus to Baghdad, right
Yeah.
to Egypt to Jordan. It extends into that entire Arab region. Um, this is what the war is against. And the idea is that demographically, Muslims are a majority in that region. And so it is, it is entirely normal for the resistance at its core to rise from an Islamic perspective,
Hmm.
right? But this has not stopped various communities, various religions within that Arab world from standing with that resistance. Because it's not an Islamic resistance in the sense that you must be Muslim to find yourself protected by it. No, you must be Arab to be protected by it. You must be part of the social fabric. In fact, what you must be is not standing with the enemy.
Mm.
What you must be is not defending Israel, not defending US imperialism. This is what this Islamic resistance is. No one has ever come up to me and told me, oh, you know, you need to become Muslim for us to be able to protect you. And neither did I ever go up to anyone and say, oh, so you're going to offer me protection now, but if I find someone else to offer me protection and who would adhere more to my Christian beliefs, maybe I will side with them against you, right? The idea is
Yeah.
not protection. The idea is identity. The
Mm.
idea is that all of this region, all of us as Arabs, quote unquote, all of us, for various reasons. I think we're going to need more than an hour to talk about that. But all of that Arab identity, that collective, that heritage, we stand with the resistance because we are not an entity separate from it. We are part of its social fabric. We
Mm.
are part of the community that supports it. We are part of the community that exists um, in it, part of
Mm.
it, inherently by it. And it exists by us, right?
Yeah.
As individuals, as people, as communities. And so your main question was uh, how did this secular, quote unquote secular, right? Axis of resistance, um, like what is its nature? What is its tone per
Mm.
se? And the truth is that it's Arab.
Yeah.
Its collective identity is Arab. And we are Arab first. Our resources are Arab. Our lifestyle is Arab. Our timing is Arab.
No comment.
Um, our day-to-day conception of life is Arab. Our heritage is Arab. Our history is Arab. Everything we do in the way we carry ourselves, it's Arab by nature. And this is what brings us all together. This is what we're defending. This is the history we're standing for. And so it happens that Islam is Arab. So it happens that a lot of Christians are Arab. So it happens that Jesus, was born in Palestine, which is Arab. Uh, so it happens that Jews exist within the Arab world.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
But the main point is that what we are defending is this Arab land, these Arab resources, and our right as Arabs to live with dignity on this land,
Mm.
to live with dignity and use our resources the way we find fit.
Mm.
Our
And
religious
also
belief,
to develop in a way
oh yeah,
that is in tune with
with
your
our identity.
culture. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So the idea is not whether we Christians stand with the Muslims or
Mm.
how do I feel as a Christian aligning with an Islamic resistance? Does that threaten me? No, it does not. It just so happens that the demographic is a majority Muslim demographic, and that's not threatening at all. In fact, one would even argue it's irrelevant,
Yeah.
right?
And I mean
Everything,
that's really interesting. Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
that's really interesting because of course, I mean in the West and on social media, what are you hearing? You're hearing from those factions that do support Israel, as you said, that are effectively this kind of political entity, the Christian Zionist faction, that are supporting imperialist, colonialist interests and are supporting de facto Israel. When you hear them say we want to to give Lebanon back to the Christians, You know, of course, in the West, this entire sectarian narrative, I mean, in Syria, it was the Alawites against the rest of the Syrians and so
Right.
on, without understanding that, for example, the Syrian Arab Army is made up of every single faith and sect and denomination inside Syria because they're all Syrians. And
Right.
this is what I'm really trying to get this across to people in the West, that stop thinking about it as Christians and Jews, and why not think about it as a nationalist or a national identity and
It's a collective
culture.
identity.
Yes,
Exactly. It's a collective
exactly.
identity.
Yeah.
It's a collective identity. And I think the question that you brought up about giving Lebanon back to the Christians,
Mm,
um, this is a real conversation that we need to have. This is a real
definitely.
conversation we need to have on a Lebanese Christian level to
Mm,
begin with, but also on an Arab level.
mm,
Um, the entire Levant needs to have that conversation. What is who are Christians in Lebanon? They're Lebanese. They're
yeah.
Arab, right? That is the main question. Now, the main argument when the West or even Lebanese Christians make that claim is they are saying at core, we are not Arab, right? The main argument is, are we Arab or are we not Arab? And this question dates all the way back to the Crusader era. So when the campaigns came all the way from Europe, uh, especially when Pope Urban uh, launched those campaigns, they came all the way from Europe and they landed um, across our coastal cities, right? And at some point, the Maronites came in from Syria and decided to come closer to the Crusader campaigns and develop relations with the Crusades, with the Crusaders. For one reason is because at the time the Maronites were having conflict with the Byzantines and with other Christian entities as well as with Islamic entities, and they saw this as an opportunity to find protection uh, from an invader that has quote unquote power, right?
Mm,
Um, that was one of the instances where that identity was brought into question because at the time that the Crusades came to the region, they had one main argument: Christians that do not practice the religion through like the Latin the Latin version
mm,
of the Bible, for example, they are not Christians. We
mm,
were dubbed heretics at the
mm,
time, right? And this is important. This is important because this is when the Latinization of our churches, of our Arab churches, and it's not one church, it's not two churches, it's all of our churches. This is when the Latinization started. And this Latinization puts to question our identity. The purpose was to say, yes, all Christians belong to that Latin identity. No, that's not true. In fact,
mm,
even the Pope back in 2000 came out and said, you know what, the Crusades were an imperialistic kind of political decision, uh, and we apologize for them. What did not happen is that apology is not enough.
yeah.
When you apologize for something, you open the door for a discussion, yes, but it does not solve an issue that is now somewhere around 1,000 years old, you
Mm,
know, just under that. So the question is, how do we Christians, especially in Lebanon, where some Christians would come out and say, oh, we are not an Islamic state, oh, we reject whatever, and we adopt the Western narrative. How do we bring back this conversation and say, all right, the main problem here is one question: are we Arab or are we not Arab? Right? What
yeah.
is our identity?
Mm,
The truth is, uh, any real historical, socio-political study would come to the conclusion that we are Arabs. Even the Crusaders themselves dubbed us as Arabs until we adopted something that's not ours. So devoid of that, which we can be devoid of. The church has given us the right to be devoid of, which is the Latinization per se. Who are we? We are Arabs. This is our identity. This is what we'll always be. We're brown-skinned. We speak Arabic. We have Arab resources. We share our land the Arab way, right? We eat the Arab way. We share our food the Arab way. These are small things. Yes,
No,
I
I
know.
know, but they're very
These are
important, especially
fundamental.
eating.
Right? These are fundamental. We don't
Yeah.
eat the way Europeans eat. We don't.
Yeah, and
One
your
of the
hospitality
shocking.
is kind of, legendary actually, and I'm very
Yeah.
blessed
The
to
most
benefit
shocking
from
things
it.
I've done in my life is asking a European for coffee and them asking me to pay them back. Right? This was shocking for me. We don't do that. It's just non-existent
Yeah.
in our culture. So no, we are Arabs. So the question of when the West puts forward that narrative, they are reviving a historical mistake, a historical wrongdoing, a historical imperialist quest
Mm.
to divide our identity. And this has been a Western imperialist plot or approach to dividing the region, right? They came in and they said, "Oh, you Lebanese, you are Phoenicians. Oh, you Egyptians, you are,
Mm.
And it's very funny because even if we look at Phoenicia, which is a civilization and not a people, quote unquote, even if we look at that and we look at Ogarit, which is one of the biggest cities of Phoenicia, it's in Syria.
Exactly. Yeah.
so, so like they created this disillusioned identity.
Mm.
And this disillusioned identity has lived on for political purposes through different institutions. It has been institutionalized, um, some through missionaries, some through NGOs, some through political support for certain political parties,
Hmm.
or otherwise. And this has existed not just in Lebanon, but also across the board, with a few exceptions, such as Yemen and Syria,
Mm.
uh, for the majority. And this has its reasons. One of the main reasons is that historically, Syria has been home for all of the resistance movements that have rejected any Western imperialism. Their
Yeah.
home has been Damascus.
Yeah.
It has been Aleppo, right? Azzeddin al-Qassam, where is he
Hmm.
from?
Mm.
Aleppo. Father Kabushi, where is he from? Aleppo,
Hmm.
right? If we look at if we look at the history of our resistance, the core of it, we will find Syria, Damascus specifically, at the core of it,
Yeah.
right? Um, so in that sense, when Christian Zionists come forward and say, we want to liberate Lebanon from Islam and make it Christian again, they're saying, we want to revive that Crusader identity.
Yeah.
The truth is, this is history long lost. This is an argument that they are now disillusioned with, not us.
Mm.
A lot of the Christians in Lebanon have now come to the realization, and it's not just a political realization, it's a fundamental realization that our existence is inherently intertwined on an integral level with the existence of our Muslim brothers and sisters.
Mm.
Right? The war in Syria has made it a fundamental realization that without this axis of resistance, we are all dead.
Yeah.
No one is saved. No one is saved. Right? The
Yeah.
Christians of Ma'lula, the Christians of Qusayr, the Christian of Wad al-Nasara, they all picked up arms. They
Hmm.
they all picked up arms. You know better, Vanessa. I mean, I think you can talk more on that than I can. But at the end of the day, they found themselves integrally aligned with that resistance, integrally aligned with that path that the resistance has taken, which is the goal, the way we avenge the martyrdom of all our people for over a century now. The way we avenge that blood is we liberate our land. So this is not just a Christian Muslim kind of debate. It's not a Jewish Islamic debate. We are
Mm.
not seeking protection from the axis of resistance. We are seeking liberation with the axis of resistance. Liberation is our protection and what
Yeah.
will defend our existence today and the future is resistance. We are part of the resistance as much as the resistance is part of us. And I think fundamentally, one incident that has made that abundantly clear, despite how painful that that incident is on all of us, the martyrdom of our leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, that martyrdom has made it abundantly clear that Christians, Muslims, the Arab world, the Islamic world has united under one banner, and it's the banner of liberation. And if this banner comes under a demographic majority of Muslims, no one has an issue with that. No one has an issue with that. This leader, this martyr, this Muslim clergy, right? He has defended all of us.
Yeah.
He has never left us out as minorities, quote unquote. He has never even referenced us as minorities, because we are not minorities as Christians. Even for this resistance, we are not minorities. We are an integral part of this social fabric.
Yeah.
So in that sense, bringing back that Christian Muslim narrative only serves to prove that liberation is on the way. Liberation is closer today than it has ever been. And there is a huge need for the West to use that language game, to use that narrative, to try to create that illusion that people must mobilize in one way or another to stand in the way of that under the defense of quote unquote Christianity, but without taking into account that us Arab Christians are the closest to that Christian heritage, to that Christian history, to that Christian land, to the Holy Land. This is our land.
Yeah.
We are the descendants of those who have lived alongside Christ. So the decision is ours, and taking that decision away from us under the pretext that you are trying to save us, this is a God complex, right? White savior complex, and it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with our decision. We have stood with the resistance. We will continue to stand with the resistance. It's not because we are standing with something external to us. We are the resistance. We are part of it, part of its social fabric. And we will continue to be that. And that's our perspective and the perspective of this entire axis. And I think there is abundant proof to look into that for anyone that's interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the past years, right?
Yeah.
And just to make one more note, 11, I think somewhere around 11 years ago, in the early start of the Syria war. Actually, it's not a Syria; it's the war on Syria.
Exactly.
Father Ilyas Zahlawi has sent an open letter to Vatican at the time, and he asked, had Christ been amongst us today, would a call for prayer have been enough for him? Right? Would he have just sat down and said, let's call to prayer and let's pray together, and that's all we can do for the oppressed people? Would that have been the decision? Would that be something our Christ, our Jesus Christ that we believe in, have done in the face of men and women burning in their tents by Israeli bombs? Is that truly something we can believe? Is that truly the Christ we have faith in? Right? And this is again puts forward the question of, we as Christians have no issue whatsoever with the resistance. We don't need the West to liberate us and make Lebanon Christian again. It is Christian. We are Christians. We have lived the same way today, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, right? We still go out, we still go party, we still drink, We still live our lives the way we want to live our lives. None of it hasn't been impacted. Um, so even on the most naive level, right? Like this is I'm bringing in the most naive level of of the differences between Christianity and Islam, and it has not been impacted. So let
Yeah.
alone our identity being impacted. Our identity is solid. It's strong. It remains um, it remains very clear that
Yeah.
we are Arabs.
And I
We
think what,
are Christians, but we are
um,
Arabs.
yeah, sorry. What's really interesting is when you talk about this Crusader doctrine, let's call it that.
Right.
You know, and if you, and I've written about this, and I know that you've written about it. You know, that who is trying to eradicate the presence of Christians in the Arab world? It's the West
Right.
by their
This
proxies.
needs another hour of conversation,
Yeah,
Melissa.
yeah, exactly. But this is also a really important point for people to
Yes.
understand because the rhetoric in the West is about protecting the Christians, right?
Yes.
And that's why they justify their presence, the UK and the US, in Syria, for example, but in the entire region, to protect the Christians, while actually they're arming and supporting and sponsoring and
Our immigration and our death. This
yeah,
is
they're glorifying the entities, the terrorist entities that are massacring the Christians for being non-compliant with their fanatic version of Islam that was incubated, as you said at the very beginning, by the British.
yes.
You know,
Yes,
whether it's
exactly.
Wahhabism, whether it's Ikhwan, Muslim Brotherhood,
Yes.
uh, all of that then become Al Qaeda and ISIS and Al Sham and whatever
Absolutely.
rebranding that they want to
Absolutely.
put on this. And so, from this perspective, the war is against this distorted version of Islam, but this version of Islam is not Islam. This comes from
This is
MI6,
the exact same
CIA.
version for
Yeah,
Islam as Christian Zionism is for us Christians.
exactly. So I think this for me is a really interesting point. So this means that the Crusader doctrine never went away. They've
No, it did
just
not. It's very much alive.
um, they've just developed it
Yes,
into
they've
this.
developed it differently.
Yeah,
They've developed it differently.
but
And
why do
we
they
do see
want?
that also in the division of the Holy Land.
Yes,
Uh, or
yes,
the insistence of calling it just the Holy Land. Yes, it is a Holy Land. It's a Holy Land for Christians, Muslims, and Jews.
hmm,
Um, but let me tell you, it's Arab land, whether you
yeah,
like it or not.
yeah,
Whether you like it or not, the people that live there are Arabs. And one thing that has been said by clergymen, um, especially priests and archbishops in Palestine, is that our churches are turning into museums.
yeah,
They're turning into museums means that this holy land, quote unquote, is now becoming devoid of Christians. Why? Because the West is not only using that military aggression, Vanessa, against Christian communities, they have even used cultural aspects and
yeah,
economic warfare to drive us out.
hmm,
Historically speaking, I'm just going to point a bit here on Lebanon, and this has been replicated in Syria since 2011. But on Lebanon, it is so easy for a Christian family to immigrate to
yeah,
Europe, Canada, US, Australia. It's so easy. It's not that difficult. And as a matter of fact, it has, through soft power strategies, it
hmm,
has been put forward to that Christian community that in doing so, you quote unquote protect yourselves. The truth is, what are we protecting ourselves from?
the West.
Who are we protecting ourselves? Like, you want us to protect ourselves from you by going out from here, flying all the way 13 hours out across oceans so that we can pay taxes to your governments so that you can bomb us again, but we will be safe in your cities as numbers doing the work that white people don't want to do. Right? This is this is what it is. This is what it started. And this has been sold to us as a grass is greener on the other side, as a golden ticket, right?
Yeah,
Out of this war zone. The truth is I am one of the people that immigrated. I immigrated back in 2013. I was very much a young child. Uh, I was still in high school at the time. Um, and I made a choice to come back. I made a choice when I finished university to come back because the truth is, we don't need protection. What we need is liberation,
Mm,
right? I will insist on that because we're really not looking for protection. We don't need someone on the outside to protect us. We are very much capable of protecting ourselves. What we need is to stand together and to say, you know what, there's decades, centuries, in fact, of war, economic, social, military, political, a war that has been waged on this region, on our Arab world. Um, it has tainted our history. It has ruined or massacred our history, in fact. It has rewritten it for it to become something so far away from reality of what the truth is, to the extent that we don't know as a generation, my generation, for the most part of us, we don't know what our history is. We know what we get told, but we don't know what our history is. Lebanon, until today, has not one book about what happened from the 1970s,
wow.
right? Not one book that the government could agree on about what happened in the Civil War. And that comes to show us that this is a very short-term history. What about this long-term history? What do we know about it?
Mm,
And can we confirm the events as they have been narrated to us? So I came back to say, you know what? Our right is to liberate our land, and then we'll talk. Let us liberate our land. Let us liberate our resources. If I have a role in assisting in the development of this region, I will do it. If you have a role, you must do it. What is the risk that we get killed? But isn't that a risk that all our people is taking? Isn't that a risk that if we immigrate, what are we outside of our own countries?
mm,
People will talk a lot when they go on cameras or or when they're filming like a TikTok or Insta kind of real thing. But at core, at least from the people that I know, everyone that has immigrated, everyone living in immigration has one common statement. We feel like we are just numbers and we have nothing to offer. We just go to work, come back home, live month to month,
mm,
right? And is that a better life, really, than being able to give, being able to offer, being able to, um, offer yourself, your life, your capabilities, your skills in service of those we love, in service of our country, in service of all of that we stand for? Like, is that something that we consider a better life, really? Like, it's very questionable, right? At least in my opinion. And even if I'm gonna go back to my very Christian kind of roots here, in the Bible, one of the commandments of Christ was love one another as I have loved you, because there is no greater love than offering oneself in service of those they love, right? And
mm.
that's a bit of a translation from Arabic. Uh, I'm not sure what it was translated to, depending on the Bibles, right? But this is what it is. This is what the commandment is: offering oneself in service of those they love. What does that mean? How do we understand that as a community? And how do we understand that not just on a religious level, on a socio-political level? Who are we? What do we have to offer? I don't know if I answered your question. I know I extended a bit on it maybe as well. Um,
No, absolutely. I think that, makes it very clear, really. And I think, obviously, another reason that the West has been trying to force this exodus of particularly Christians from the region is because then there is no balance, or rather, there's no counter argument to their this is the
the
war
Muslim
against
barbaric
barbarians.
argument.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Whereas, of course, the fact that Christians have remained and are an integral part of the
Absolutely.
societies uh, sort of destroys their arguments, right? Because are they
Absolutely.
saying that Christians are barbarians then, just because they don't live in the West? And so this narrative has been very difficult for them to manage, in my opinion. The problem is that a lot of people in the West are or have been gaslighted into believing. I still have people ask me whether I can celebrate Christmas in Syria. And it's very hard not to kind of laugh because I think, yeah, there's
No
actually
one
more.
celebrate Christmas better than us here.
Exactly. And we have two Christmases, of course, like probably in Lebanon also. I've not
Yeah.
spent Christmas in
Yeah.
Lebanon. But
We
you
have
have the
three or four.
Orthodox and the Catholic, and so you have two, and you have two
Right.
Easters also. And
Yeah.
if you go on the streets in the old city, particularly in what they call the Christian quarters, but all the quarters
Right.
mixed together, the Jewish quarter, which, by the way, most of those houses are now rented to Palestinians.
Nice.
So the Jews that did do Aliyah to Israel, they rented out their homes to Palestinians that had fled during the Nakba and during the subsequent
Right.
ethnic cleansing pogroms by the Zionist movement. And so, but when you go on the streets of the old city, there's more Muslims taking selfies in front of Christmas trees than there are Christians.
Agree.
And that's
100%.
not just a demographic thing, it's just that all of these festivals kind of merge together because people respect each other's faiths, they respect each other's culture and what's the word I'm trying to think of? Traditions within their religions, and it all is such a kind of diverse coexistence. It's beautiful. I wish more people could come to Lebanon and
To see
Syria
it.
and see this
No, I agree with you
diversity and
100%.
tapestry. It's beautiful.
100%. Even a short story on that.
Mm.
One of the most things that bother the Western narrative is when a Christian comes out and says, "We stand with the resistance." Right?
Yep.
This has been one of the most painful things the Western narrative has had to deal with, whether it was in Gaza,
Mm.
when people realized there's a Baptist, hospital in
Mm.
Gaza.
Yeah. And
It
one of
was
the oldest churches.
right, and people were shocked. They're like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God!" Like, yeah, our churches have never been threatened by Muslims. In fact, they have been bombed by, Zionists. So
Mm.
that should put everything back into question. But one of the funny things is that, for example, like during Easter or during Ramadan,
Mm.
in the office or like among friends, we fast with each other, the
Yep.
Christians and the Muslims. So if someone is fasting, you kind of end up fasting with them, and when they
Yes.
when they when they break fast, you just break fast with them, right? And it's we have reached that level of coexistence. It has always been the case.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, I mean, you mentioned Abuna
Celebrating each
Abuna
other.
Zakhlawi, who's just, I don't know, he's an angel on earth, I think. But
Indeed.
and he, I think there's a couple of things I just want to finish on. I could keep talking to you all night, actually. But you mentioned the letter, but he's written dozens of letters actually to the Vatican, asking them why they are not taking a stronger stance against imperialism in Syria in particular, of course,
Right.
but regionally. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned in your article, and it's the first time I have to say that I've heard about this, is this just war doctrine. Can you just explain what that is and what, if it were to be put into effect, what it could possibly do?
Right. So the just war doctrine is not something that I'm putting forward. It's not something that's new, right? The just war doctrine um, was, in fact, historically used to launch the Crusades.
Mm.
So righting a historical wrong through that doctrine um, would actually come a long way for the Catholic Church. Um, the idea of it is that Sometimes war, going to war, or taking the decision to go to war, which includes the killing of others and the killing of ourselves, right? Of the people that are going to war. Because you both kill and get killed in wars, right? The idea is that taking the decision to kill and get killed through a war that serves to diminish the pain and oppression upon a people in such a way that the killing of that other is not more oppressive in essence, is in fact a just decision. So defending the oppressed, standing up for the oppressed, even at the cost of war, can be justified, religiously speaking, right? And this today, if we look at it today, in terms of upholding that justice and minimizing harm, standing up to the oppressed, sorry, and looking at the likelihood of the success of such a war effort, right? If we look at it today and we just presume that Vatican has taken the decision to call for a just war, who's gonna be fighting and who are we gonna be fighting, right? Even if I'm gonna be very specific here, even if Vatican calls for a just war launched solely by Arab Christians, right? Fought solely by Arab Christians, in a justified way, in defense of the oppressed. And here I need to be clear that the Bible never speaks of the oppressed as only Christian oppressed people. We speak of the oppressed as any oppressed people, right? And this is fundamental in our Christian belief. The concept is, if this is called, right? If the legitimacy of going to war is called in, what we will witness is something similar to what Syria witnessed in Ma'lula. What we will witness is Christians, Arab Christians, defending their Arab brothers through arms under the banner of the church, alongside the Muslim brothers and sisters that are defending their Arab brothers in Palestine under the banner of Islam. Right? What we will see is that Arab banner, religiously speaking, Christians and Muslims, which is a sub-identity under that collective Arab identity, we will see that becoming a reality openly without any holding back on the Christian religious level. And so we will inevitably see the liberation militarily of Palestine, but we will see more than that. We will see unity in our belonging. We will see that martyrdom is in fact one of our Christian virtues in defense of the oppressed. Right? We will see that our churches will once again be filled with people that have faith in the institution and just not just faith in Jesus Christ. We will see the Christian institutions once again addressing the concerns of the very people they're supposed to guide, the very people they're supposed to spend their existence serving, right? Because clergies are fathers, they're brothers. They come in service of their people, right? In service of this Christian community. And how do we come in service of the oppressed? How do we come in service of the oppressed? How do we come in service of the oppressed when there is a televised genocide, right? Isn't it time to bring forward that just war doctrine and allow us the legitimacy institutionally, not just through our faith of who Christ is, what would have Christ done, right? Who are we as Arabs and our Arab drive for defense, but give us the legitimacy religiously through these institutions to do something, right? To do something in defense of these people that are being bombed day and night,
Yeah.
without intervention from any Christian institution. And that's really that's one of the things that is driving people away from the church. The church no longer deals with the concerns of the people. They're not doing a good job at that, right? And there is this big question in the church of how do we keep that Christian community alive? How do we grow it? How do we deal with it? Well, the answer is don't just look at what makes people happy. Sometimes we need to look at what makes the community flourish. And
Yeah.
what makes the community flourish is these tough decisions. No one likes it. No one likes going to war. Like, no one. Not a single person I know. Even the men of that axis of resistance, they don't like going to war. Going to war is about defending the dignity of the people. It's about liberation. It's about standing up for what is right, even when we are the only people standing up. This is what it's about, right? It's about defending our religious land, our religious heritage, our Arab heritage, it's about defending all of this. No one likes it. But what options do we have? And if the church institutionally gives us that legitimacy, it is my opinion that we will be able to, as Christians, find ourselves grounded in our land more prominently, more comfortably. A lot of people will come back. A lot of people that were immigrated or pushed out in one way or another, whether it's in Syria or in Lebanon or in Egypt or in Palestine.
Yeah.
They will come back because now they have something to do to defend their right to exist in this land. And it has become legitimized, even on a religious level, right? So I think that's fundamental. I don't know if that explains it.
Yes, it does
In a sense.
extremely well. I
So
think actually I mean, it's a very strong note to end the conversation on. I think for this time it would be really great to catch up with you again about, because we touched on so many different subjects, and I would love to
right.
kind of go even further, particularly into other countries in the region that have undergone very similar attempts at sectarian division. I mean, Yemen, Iraq
Yes.
faced very similar projects against them that maybe a lot of people are not aware of, particularly in Yemen, which was going to be divided into 6 sectarian states.
Yeah.
You know, so I
It was
think
the Lebanon project was to be projected, right?
yeah.
The Lebanization of Iraq, for example, has become a very widely used term in Western narratives.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. All
Yeah.
right, so I'm not gonna talk too much anymore.
Can you just let people know where they can catch up with you, like on X? And I know you write for Al Mayadeen. Is there anywhere else people can follow you?
I do have my website. It's definitely posted on X. It's on my profile. My handle on X is Myriam Myriam 00961. I'm pretty sure you can also tag me or like have it at the bottom of like a Substack section when you post about this
Yeah, I will do.
if you like. And that's the best way to reach out. Feel free to send me messages if a conversation is needed. I am very much into that interactive version of trying to solve the problems of the region rather than just lecturing people about what they have to do, what they need to do. Because it is a collective effort, because it is a collective identity that we're dealing with, that we're trying to, I don't want to say establish or reestablish, we are trying to reemerge as a collective, right? And this needs all our collective efforts. So that's on one note, and I'm always happy to target the Western narrative, and the unmaking of that is always a pleasure. So yeah, we can talk more. Definitely, we'll definitely hopefully talk more.
Well, I definitely, hopefully. we'll actually meet each other next time.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That would be great. That would be
Miriam,
great. Thank you very much, Vanessa, for
thank you. I
having me.
really enjoyed it. I'll see you very, very soon. Please take care.
Right back at you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.